Tonight, nearly 3 million people in Ontario now qualify for COVID-19 booster shots. Several groups of high-risk Ontarians can now book their next dose, but tonight there's some confusion and frustration. We'll explain.
One foot in front of the other and lead with love.
Hundreds rally at Queen's Park as part of a global day of action calling for climate justice.
I drove by, I was in shock. Like, is there really a lineup outside?
Plus, what's believed to be the first of its kind holiday market in Toronto, celebrating Indigenous artists and creators.
This is CBC Saturday News.
Hello, thanks for joining us. A big step forward tonight when it comes to COVID-19 booster shots. Several groups of people considered high risk can now start booking their next dose. While some healthcare workers are getting a third dose, it's not required. As Lorenda Redicop reports tonight, that is leading to some concern and frustration.
At this pharmacy, they're providing flu shots and also COVID vaccines. Starting Saturday, more people are eligible for a booster.
It's actually perfectly safe to get both the flu and COVID vaccine at the same time. It saves you like one trip, we get both shots done, and then you're done.
Seniors 70 plus, Indigenous people, those with 2 doses of AstraZeneca, and frontline healthcare workers can now get a booster, as long as they've waited 6 months since their second dose. Eligibility expands as the average number of daily cases continues to climb.
This pop-up clinic in a church is available for boosters and also trying to reach people who still don't have a first or second dose. Sign language interpreters are on hand to make it more accessible.
One of the community ambassadors on site is an Indigenous activist. She says they offer incentives to get people through the door.
Sometimes we have, to certain days, we have Presto cards, we have Uber cards. I brought baby masks for the babies.
But while healthcare workers can now get their third dose, some are still without any shots. The Ontario government recently announced it would not mandate vaccinations for healthcare workers.
You can see that this is very, very unstable. It's verging on the chaotic.
The head of the Hospital Association tweeted about a hospital CEO receiving a death threat at a location that's implemented its own policy.
So this is totally unacceptable in this province. Hospitals are essentially swinging out there in the wind, now left to implement policy decisions on their own about mandatory vaccination, when in reality, a provincial policy with full force of the law would be a far more effective tool.
He wants the province to reconsider its decision and mandate vaccinations for all frontline healthcare workers. Lorenda Redicop, CBC News, Toronto.
The province recorded 508 new COVID-19 cases today. Yesterday, Ontario logged 563 new cases. This is the first time since early last month that we're seeing those kinds of numbers 2 days in a row. There are currently 130 people in ICU. 115 of those are not fully vaccinated. 3 more people have died. People around the world uniting today in a series of rallies calling for climate justice. It comes as global leaders continue meeting in Scotland for the COP26 UN Climate Change Conference. Jalia Ashry takes us to a demonstration in Toronto.
Hundreds of climate activists were on legislature grounds this afternoon. A coalition of labor, environmental, and social justice groups organized the climate rally, taking the matter in their own hands and calling for change.
All coming together to put pressure for real action to solve the climate crisis that doesn't leave any community or person behind.
Halfway through the COP26 climate conference in Glasgow, protesters held another large rally. Angry words for corporations and outrage at the plight faced by farmers. The conference has seen promises to phase out coal, slash methane emissions, and slow deforestation. Mass mobilizations of people of all ages across the world joined today's Global Day of Action, from Australia to South Korea to Queen's Park. Demonstrators taking things one step at a time.
One foot in front of the other and lead with love.
demanding governments to prioritize climate justice with real action to reduce carbon emissions.
One of the leading causes of climate change and methane emissions is the way that we produce our food system. So we're advocating for a transition to a more sustainable food system by transitioning to a plant-based food system.
I spoke to one member from the Indigenous community at today's climate rally, and she's calling on the Canadian government to ensure that Indigenous voices are at the forefront of climate change discussions.
Indigenous people have rights and they have to be consulted, and they have the say on what happens on their lands and resources. We need to rather see pipelines of water to Indigenous communities instead of oil pipelines.
For youth activists like Zoe Curie-Matzner, the climate crisis is important now more than ever.
It feels like my future and my generation's future and the future of the planet is on the line. And so we are here today to put pressure on governments to get real climate action for our futures.
Dahlia Ashry, CBC News, Toronto.
And coming up a little later on in the show, I'll speak to the creator of a new TV show who's hoping to teach kids about climate change and inspire more diversity in the movement. Well, turning now to the U.S. and a big story we're tracking there. 8 people are dead after a stampede at a Houston music festival last night. Officials described a surging crowd that left another 300 injured. Chris Glover is in Washington. He has the latest on the tragedy.
Saturday's daybreak reveals an unsettling crime scene to which so many had a terrifying front row seat.
It just got worse and worse. Everyone's like, you just can't breathe. It was so hard to move your arms and it was so hard to breathe.
A Houston music festival with the dream of bringing people together, quickly turning into a nightmare.
It felt like we was in a concert in hell.
Festival goers turning into eyewitnesses.
Just imagine all the people they're gonna find tonight who was in that crowd, who nobody could see, who nobody could hear, who passed out, and everybody was just trampling on top of them.
The 50,000-person festival was halted.
Everybody go put a middle finger up in the sky.
As authorities declared a mass casualty event around 9:30 p.m.
The crowd began to compress towards the front of the stage, okay? And that caused some panic.
The fire chief describing a lethal cycle, injuries causing panic, causing more injuries. His assistant chief confirming several went into cardiac arrest.
It seemed like it happened with just over the course of just a few minutes. Suddenly we had several people down on the ground.
I just remember looking up and passing out. And then
Madeline Eskin says she was one of them.
I just felt, I was having constant pressure on my chest, constant pressure on my back. It was from the side, I was being squeezed.
We leave no stones unturned.
Today, the chief of police says their preliminary investigation found a security guard who felt unconscious in the chaos may have been purposefully drugged.
He was revived, and the medical staff did notice a prick that was similar to a prick that you would get if somebody's trying to inject.
Hold on, don't touch him, don't touch him. Everybody just back up.
Astro World Festival founder, rapper Travis Scott, on stage when it happened, tweeted today he is devastated and assisting authorities.
We've never had anything like this occur.
Houston's mayor says some of those taken to hospital have been released.
Some of them have been reunited with their families already.
But this night of terror is likely to continue to haunt people for many nights ahead. Chris Glover, CBC News, Washington.
Closer to home, a 40-year-old woman has been charged with second-degree murder following the death of a grandmother in Oshawa. 67-year-old Ruth Humphreys was found dead in her home on Tuesday. Police say this is an isolated incident and they're not looking for any further suspects. As for the relationship between the two women, police are not saying at this point. A reminder tonight to roll the clocks back at 2 a.m. For some, that means some extra sleep, but maybe not for those with little kids. The return to standard time means fewer daylight hours and therefore reduced visibility for all road users in the evening. The City of Toronto says pedestrian collisions increased by more than 30% during the evening hours between November and March. And it's urging all road users to drive slowly, obey speed limits, and pedestrians especially to stay alert. Time now for a look at the first forecast. We're going to see some double digits coming up. Victoria Van Alvarado has more on the weather and what we can expect this weekend.
Yes, it is that time of year again. Daylight savings time is ending Sunday, November 7th. That is tomorrow. So be sure to change your clocks backwards 1 hour. I like to remember spring forward in the spring, fall back in the fall. It's like the oldest trick in the book. With that being said, good news, we actually do get an extra hour of sleep. I also recommend changing your clock before you go to bed just so you wake up on time in the morning. Taking a look at your temperatures now, this is your short range forecast. 7 degrees this evening in Toronto, so if you are at the Leafs game, take advantage. It is going to be a nice night. I'm wearing blue in honor of the Leafs. Go Leafs go. And let's head into your overnight. 4 degrees, feeling like 1, and a chilly morning for your Sunday. 4 degrees, feeling more like 0. And we do have a temperature story for the rest of your week. I'll get to that in the long range forecast later on in the newscast. But first, precipitation wise, clear for the GTA. Up north, Sudbury and Timmins could see some rain by Saturday and Sunday, but it's the temperatures that is the real story. We are well above seasonal. It's a little spoiler alert for you, but I will see you back later on in the newscast with more on that.
What do we want? Climate justice! When do we want it? Now!
This was the scene on the streets in Glasgow today as thousands of protesters called for action on climate change. Demonstrations like this are being held around the world. Earlier, we told you about the event in Toronto. Several youth activists have been at the forefront of the movement, but some say the diversity of voices is still lacking. A new Canadian children's TV show aims to inspire change and more representation in the movement.
I found more info on this sludge corp. They caused a huge disaster. They say they brought pollution to life. Yeah, I think this place is bad news. You should get out of there. What? Letty!
That's a clip of Big Blue, which is launching next month. The animated sci-fi comedy follows two Black siblings on their adventures underwater. The series creator says the show is meant to teach kids about climate change and aims to help children from diverse backgrounds feel represented on screen and inspired to take action. Jima Gariba is the illustrator, designer, and animator behind Big Blue. He joins us more now to talk about it. Thank you so much for being here. And just take us back. You get this idea to start a children's show, you're dreaming it up. How did you land on a sci-fi underwater animated series?
First of all, hi, thanks for having me. I think the excitement behind it being like a sci-fi underwater animated series was because at Guru Studios, where I currently work, there was a call for pitches, and I'd been watching a lot of like deep sea ocean documentaries and things like that, and I always thought it was fascinating how there was as much science about the underwater world as there were myths about it.
Right.
And I thought it'd be a really fun, exciting thing to fuse together.
Yeah, no, we were talking earlier and I was telling you I have like a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I know it can be a struggle to try to break down these big concepts. You want to start the conversations early, but it can be hard to do that. How does your show talk to kids about protecting the planet?
Yeah, I think especially even when I was growing up, like 10 years ago, the conversation about the climate crisis was like pretty looming. It was pretty daunting, and everything seemed like a lot of doom and gloom. And I thought that having an opportunity to create a show where the conversation could be started, but using metaphors that felt kind of hopeful, even through the characters and how they represent themselves. So instead of thinking it so distantly as, oh, what can I do to save this big planet? It's more coming at it from the point of view of like a character. What can I do to help animals? What can I do to help my friends? What can I do to help my community? Just starting small and then having it blow out into this fantastical world is a nice metaphor, I thought.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you talk about your own childhood and your experiences, your siblings all being an inspiration for the show. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think growing up in a big family is one of the best gifts of my life. I didn't think so at the time when I was a kid, because I mean, you're having to share all your stuff and you're having to like share your space. But a lot of the tools that I learned growing up in our pretty big family, I'm a brother to 3,
is a lot of the stuff that I use and apply in my everyday life. Just trying to think about compassion and think about how you can have all these different personalities in one space and still be working towards like the goal of laughing together and being better.
Yeah, and I know we've been showing these images from COP26 all week, and there's been talk about whose voices are actually being heard on the world stage and the lack of diversity. And I know it's important for you in this show, for kids, diverse kids especially, to see themselves represented. Big Blue has 5 different personalities, and it sounds like, yeah, kind of like your big family.
Yeah, definitely. And also a lot like the family on the show, the production crew of the show. It takes so long to make these shows. So there's a lot of different kinds of personalities, I think, that ended up being poured into what the initial nugget of the idea was. But yeah, it's really important for me to have diverse representation on screen, just because growing up, I used to watch a lot of cartoons, and it's pretty... When you're a kid, it's pretty easy to project yourself onto cartoon characters and find a character that responds and feels more like your personality type. So especially for kids of color, I thought it was a really nice thing that for once they wouldn't have the obstacle of having to imagine themselves in this hopeful future, that it was handed to them.
Yes, it's amazing. I mean, you've been working on this for a long time. It's going to launch next month. What's your hope when you think about like little kids tuning in and watching this show?
I hope every kid finds a character that they can identify with. One of the things that our director, Ricardo Durante, always brought to the table was that the stories had to be about the characters. And throughout the process of the show, everybody on the crew and everybody who's seen it has a favorite character that they gravitate towards. So I hope that when kids are watching the show, more than anything, that they fall in love and they can see themselves, and that they just learn a lot more about caring about each other, because we got a goofy cast and they don't always get along, but at the end, they really do care about each other. And I think that's the part I'm most proud of the show.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of it with us. We're excited to watch it. We appreciate you taking the time. The show Big Blue launches December 4th on CBC Kids and CBC Gem.
Thank you.
Halloween may be barely behind us, but some are already getting in the holiday spirit. There's a new market that's just opened in Toronto, featuring the work of 15 Indigenous artists. As Dale Manukduk shows us, it's believed to be the first of its kind in the city.
People waited in line for the grand opening of Anpava's Indigenous Art Market. For the patrons, it was well worth it.
A lovely, smaller case and some Indigenous art in forms of cards.
And I'm a big fan of Mo Thunder, so it's an honor to own some of their work now.
Organizers were just as thrilled. The market is the brainchild of Barb Nawagabo and Millie Knapp. It features 15 Indigenous artists from 6 different nations, each with a unique craft in visual arts, beadwork, jewelry, and other media.
So many people in, and the reception to this shop, to this market, and to the work of our artists has been beyond belief.
It's amazing. When I drove by, I was in shock. Like, is there really a lineup outside?
The market took 2 months to organize, a fraction of the pandemic, which has been especially tough on Indigenous artists who rely on in-person events to sell their work. They often travel what's called the Powwow Trail and go back and forth from the United States.
And I think what happens when you're isolated and you're suffering economically, the inspiration is hard to come.
The market offered a chance to regain that inspiration. Those who walked away with some of the work feel it's important to support Indigenous artists.
I think that it's important for settlers to find ways towards reciprocity, and I think one way of that is through supporting business, you know, like what better way than to put your money where your intentions are.
It's so meaningful for us to have this opportunity to not just see the product, but also feel part of the culture, feel part of the background and the experience that goes into the creation of this.
The market will be open until December 24th and plans to go online afterwards and perhaps a permanent brick and mortar store. Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
And a note for commuters who use the Lakeshore East GO line this weekend. GO trains are not running between Guildwood and Pickering GO stations. This is due to construction work being done on the tracks. Bus replacements are running express from Oshawa, making all stops to Pickering and then continuing to Guildwood GO Station. A Diwali celebration today dedicated to female identifying folks.
Wanted to celebrate that through a female lens as well. And so we have Sangeet Darbar, which is a day where through poetry and song, we get to really connect with our spiritual and cultural selves.
She adds her goal is to encourage dialogue between multiple generations of women in a family. There was traditional dancing, tea, samosas, and music. The exhibition, called Eye of the Nightingale, is located in Bayview Village and is part of Artworks TO. It features the works of 7 artists from across Canada. Victoria is back now with our full forecast and that important reminder about daylight savings time.
Thanks for having me back. We're taking a look at your long-range forecast now, and good news, no precipitation in sight for the GTA. By Saturday and Sunday, Sudbury and Timmins could see some rain, some showers. Not a washout, though. And as we head into the rest of your early week, cloud cover starts to build up on Monday and in through Tuesday. So it is going to feel a little cooler, but it is beautiful for your weekend. Let's say you're headed to the Raptors game tomorrow. It's an early game. Take advantage of the sun and these temperatures. Look at the board. 14 degrees. Toronto, Hamilton, London, Windsor, Barrie, Sudbury 12 degrees, and that's that rain that I mentioned earlier. Seasonal is 9 degrees. So we are well above that. It is my favorite weather, sweater weather. As we take a look at your Monday, Toronto 15, Mississauga, Brampton, and Guelph 14. And for your Tuesday, that's when the cloud cover does start to build. So temperatures are going to drop slightly. Toronto 13 degrees, Hamilton, London 13 as well, and Windsor 14 degrees there. And I want to mention once more again, clocks do go back 1 hour. So fall back, spring forward. We are in the fall. So clocks go back 1 hour, 2 a.m. local time. I like to do it before I go to bed to eliminate the stress in the morning. The rest of your week, this is Ottawa. By Wednesday, we could see some rain, and Friday as well. 10 degrees for Wednesday, Thursday, 11 for Friday, and Toronto, similar there as well. Beautiful Sunday, Monday. By Tuesday, Wednesday, we do get that drop in temperature, 11 degrees for your Wednesday, and some rain could be seen on Friday.
Sunday and Monday look beautiful, though, don't they? Double digits and sunshine. That is our show for tonight. Before we go, we want to leave you with some more images from the Diwali celebration earlier today. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope you have a great night.